It's so good to be able to reconnect with people that I hadn't seen for a while. Tonight, my old landlord is here, and other people that I hadn't seen for a while. The memories that Samantha and I had when we lived here are just filled with a lot of good, positive things, and so it's always a pleasure to be back and to catch up with not only the church here, but people that I knew from other places when I was here as well. If this is your first time here, in other words, if you weren't here last night, you're stepping into the middle of a conversation that we set up last night by describing how our culture is becoming increasingly irreligious or non-interested in religion. And so how do we reason with people in a society that's becoming more and more secular? And how do we become able and equipped to be able to reach people at their level? And this is oftentimes how people will try to reach others at their level. They'll say, well, I'm not sure that I believe in the Bible. And then I oftentimes have thought, okay, well, meeting them at their level means giving them 6,000 reasons why they should trust the Bible, because that's the question that they have. We understand that we should meet people where they're at when it comes to intellectually what they're asking about. But sometimes we might fail to discern what's behind the argument that they're bringing up. And so last night we talked about different emotional reasons people might have to be an unbeliever. It might be that somebody wants to justify some kind of sin that they're addicted to or that they want to keep committing. And so in their desire to justify their sin, they come up with a lot of sophisticated sounding arguments. And we can be distracted thinking that the sophisticated arguments are the deep discussion, when actually the deep discussion that needs to take place is what's going on in your heart. So desire to sin is sometimes an emotional reason for unbelief, but so is a bad religious experience. People can have grown up in hypocritical families, people can have grown up in a hypocritical church. That can be another reason, or just social pressure. People in their school, people in their workplace are pushing secular values on people, and they don't want to have to stick out like a sore thumb in those environments. And so then I'll start to adopt these sophisticated sounding arguments on why I don't believe in the Bible. And all the while, somebody might appear to be very objectively minded, very rationalistic, but it's really emotional reasons for their unbelief. So what does it really mean to meet somebody where they're at? You got to discern, do they have emotional reasons for their unbelief? And if there are emotional reasons for their unbelief, did Jesus ever appeal to people based on the emotional reasons that you should believe in him? Like, for example, Jesus would say this in John chapter 7, verse 37, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. He doesn't tell this crowd of people that haven't yet believed in him that here's all the reasons why I am who I say I am, that sort of thing. And there's times and places to give arguments like that. But another approach that Jesus would have is he would say, you look deep into the needs that you know you have, and you come to me to satisfy those things. And so what we're doing tonight and tomorrow is looking at 3 different universal human needs, and how, if we contrast the secular worldview or the non-religious worldview, the worldview that doesn't consider eternity, things like that, you compare the secular worldview to the biblical worldview and just lay all the information out there, and you say, which worldview best satisfies my deepest needs? Now, I forgot to say this last night, but I want to make sure that I'm careful in how I present this. That this approach to studying with skeptics and what we're going to do tonight is going to run through exactly what I do when I study with atheists. I don't want to get everybody's impression to be that this is the magic bullet that will convert everybody. The Bible still teaches most people will not be saved. But what I'm arguing and what I'm trying to show this weekend is that if the only way that we try to reason with skeptics and atheists and people that have skepticism is just by giving objective arguments on archaeological reasons for the Bible and why we should trust that God exists and things like that, if we just are all intellect, we're missing another component to what it means to be a human being, and that's the emotional level. So I'm trying to add another tool that we can use in our conversations. And so tonight we're going to be talking about our universal need for meaning in life. I don't know if you've ever heard of Viktor Frankl, but Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychoanalyst. And he was taken into a Jewish concentration camp. And as a psychoanalyst, he kept analyzing people while he was in the concentration camps. And so he wrote this book called Man's Search for Meaning. In the book and in the rest of his career after the concentration camps, he created something that he called logotherapy or logotherapy. And he describes it as this. Logotherapy regards its assignment as that of assisting the patient to find meaning in his life. So whenever somebody would come with depression, somebody would come with feeling downcast or upset that things in life are not what they wanted them to be, he would always try to attack whether or not they have meaning in life. And if he could do something that would help people have some degree of meaning in life, he would see that their depression and their mental illness, things like that, would start to evaporate. Well, what does it mean to have meaning in life? To have meaning in life means that you look back to your origins and you can answer the question, why am I here? What's my purpose for living? And so what I want to do in this session is compare, okay, if you're a secular person, you're a non-Christian, do you try to find meaning in life? Yes, everybody tries to find meaning in life. So if we really try to listen to a skeptic and try to find out, okay, how is it that you find meaning in your life without God? We'll talk about that and the weaknesses to those approaches, and then contrast that with the biblical approach. And so the first half of this, we're going to be looking at quotes from atheists and skeptics that talk about how they try to find meaning in life. All right, so let's look at how a secular person would try to find meaning. Here's one quote from an atheist named Fabian Suchanek. And he says, the purpose of life must be the intention of the creator of life. The purpose of life must be the intention that the creator of life pursued with his creation. Now, unfortunately, there is no such creator in the atheist worldview. Thus, the notion of purpose in life, in the sense of an intention of the creator, is undefined in an atheist world. For atheists, there is no God-given purpose of life. Now, this is one of the quotes that I've shown to skeptics whenever we're trying to get the basis of our discussion, and they go, yeah, that's right. There is no God that's assigned any meaning to our life, no purpose to our life. And so in a very real sense, in an objective way, there is no ultimate meaning in life. And we as skeptics have to accept that, and we have to work with that. But that doesn't mean that a skeptic wouldn't still try to find something in life to find some meaning in that they decide for themselves. It's not assigned by a God, but I get to decide for myself what that thing might be. And so look at this quote from Adam Rutherford, where he says this, "A meaningless universe does not mean we live our lives without purpose. I'm an atheist, but I try to live my life replete with purpose. Be kind, learn and discover as much as you can, share that knowledge, relieve suffering when you can, have tonnes," he's British, they say tons, but it looks like tonnes. "Have tonnes of fun, that's why it's not pointless. We have the power to create life and to show those lives wonder. Surely that's enough. It is for me." Now, whenever I've shown this quote to skeptics, they really like this one. And they say, that really describes how I find my meaning in life. I don't need a big God in the sky that's going to judge me one day. I can decide for myself what's going to give me meaning, and so I like to be kind. You know, you ever been in a drive-thru where the person behind you just kind of looks like they got a frowny face or something? And I just want to do a nice thing, and I want to pay for their drink at Starbucks that costs $30, and I want to make them feel really happy. And so it gives me meaning in life to be kind to people. That's really fun. I also like to learn and discover things and share that with other people. Do you like to read books and listen to podcasts and just constantly learn new things and then being able to talk about those things with other people? That's super cool. And then also relieve suffering. I mean, to be able to help somebody financially, to be able to help somebody economically, you know, it's just, and then having tonnes of fun. Who doesn't like to have fun? And that's just really a catch-all for all kinds, you know, movies, music, theme parks, sports, whatever. Now, before we start to pick apart what's wrong with this, I want you to really analyze yourself and ask yourself if you know what's wrong with this quote. Or could you say that that pretty well describes how I find my meaning in life? So amen, Mr. Atheist. If you're a Christian and you're discerning, you will start to figure out what's wrong with this quote. But if you look at that and go, yeah, that's how I find my meaning, you might come to find out that you've been infected with more skepticism and more worldliness than you realized. What are the weaknesses of this first approach to finding meaning in life? I decide for myself that what is it? What's wrong with this? As you look at the parts that are in yellow here, ask yourself this question: what kind of people can that meaning in life apply to? Who can say that that's my meaning in life? And I'll just say it this way, that this approach to having meaning in life cannot apply to everyone in the world. And if you have a worldview that cannot apply to everybody in the world, then you have a bad worldview. I mean, I remember when I was with Barry, and Barry would tell me about times that he went to India, and he saw people that were carried to the side of the road that didn't have any legs, and people had to carry these people to the side of the road with a hat so that people, or a jacket opened up so that people could hand money to that person. Let's say that you're Fabian Suchanek or you're Adam Rutherford, and you want to go up to this guy that's under this amount of suffering, and you want to say, hey, here's how you find meaning in life, sir. Just try to learn and discover and share all the things that you learn and discover, and then share those things. Like and try to relieve suffering. Like, what are you doing here? Like, you need to have more meaning in life by relieving the suffering of other people. Do you realize that the only people that can relieve other people's suffering are people that are in a place of privilege? And if you want to say that this is your meaning in life, you can't. Not everybody in the world can do this. Or you want to have tons of fun? Do you think that guy on the side of the road, do you see the point? If your worldview can't apply to everybody in the world, it by definition cannot be a good worldview. Maybe this is how some Westerners think. Maybe this is how some people that are in more wealthy countries might think about this. But this is not how most people can think. So that's the first problem with this, is that this approach to meaning in life cannot apply to everybody in the world. But there's another problem with it. The second problem with this approach is that it's vexing to think about. There's this quote from Leo Tolstoy, the famous Russian author. He's the guy that wrote War and Peace. And even when he was in his 50s, he was a very healthy person. He was extremely wealthy. He was the top dog of the Hollywood of the day in Russia. Everybody knew who this guy was. And he wrote a short book called Confessions, and in his short book called Confessions, what he does in the book is he recounts the thought processes that led him from a secular worldview to at least believing in God. I don't know that he became a New Testament Christian, but what were the thought processes that got him from being frustrated with being a secular person to being a believer in the Bible? Look at this quote that he says here. I could give no reasonable meaning to any single action or to my whole life. Sooner or later, my affairs, whatever they may be, will be forgotten, and I shall not exist. Then why go on making any effort? How can man fail to see this, and how go on living? That is what is surprising. One can only live while one is intoxicated with life. As soon as one is sober, it is impossible not to see that it is all a mere fraud and a stupid fraud. That is precisely what it is. There is nothing either amusing or witty about it. It is simply cruel and stupid. Now, notice what Tolstoy is saying here. He couldn't assign any meaning in life to any single action that he did. He's got a garden in his backyard. I don't know what the ultimate purpose of this is. I'm writing a whole new book that's going to take me 7 years to write. I don't know what the point of that is either. And after I die, I don't know what the point of any of this ever was to begin with. Now, he says that you can go on living just fine when he says this: one can only live while one is intoxicated with life. Now, when he says that, he's not saying that if I just literally get drunk all the time, I'll be okay. Instead, what he means by this is as long as I don't ever stop and think about the deep questions in life, and I'm just a shallow-minded kind of person, I can get on and be happy and all that sort of thing. But just like the waves crash in on the beach, These questions kept crashing back on to Leo Tolstoy. What's the meaning of all of this? And maybe he could forget about those questions for a few days, but then he'd be laying in bed at night and he couldn't stop thinking about these sorts of things again. We live in a society that is very good at amusing ourselves. Do you know what the word muse means? M-U-S-E. To muse means to think or ponder deeply. What does the prefix a mean? Without. Do you know what amusement is? Something that is amusing is something that's not causing you to think very deeply. So we get on social media and we scroll and we scroll and we see cats flushing toilets and we see trucks that are made that are souped up and we see people in India making cool swimming pools in their backyard and we're just scrolling. Have you ever seen those videos of them making those swimming pools? It's crazy. But we see all these things and they're not causing us to ask any deep questions, and it's saying here that as long as you can just keep thinking like a drunk person, you'll be fine, but then as soon as you want to start thinking deeply, you've got problems. Well, what's the solution in the secular worldview to this problem of being a deep thinker, leading me to more despair and all this kind of stuff like what happened with Leo Tolstoy? Because certainly we wouldn't want to become Christians. Look at what another atheist named Will Storr says about this. We know how this ends. You're going to die, and so will everyone you love. Human life, in all its noise and hubris, will be rendered meaningless for eternity. The cure for the horror is story. Our brains distract us from this terrible truth by filling our lives with hopeful goals and encouraging us to strive for them. It gives our existence the illusion of meaning and turns our gaze from the dread. Now, if you read what skeptics say, this is the kind of stuff that you're going to find. That there's no ultimate meaning in life. We have an illusion of meaning, and one of the things that does that for us is we like stories. We like to watch movies that have engaging stories. We like to read books that have engaging stories and all that kind of thing. And these things, as he says here, distract us. Go on. Keep thinking like a drunk person. Never ask yourself any deep questions. And isn't it ironic that the skeptics who try to present themselves as the deep thinkers are the very ones who can't think about the deepest questions? Because as soon as you start to plop these questions out in front of them, hey, what's your meaning in life? What's left after you die? Viktor Frankl, in the book Man's Search for Meaning, he said this about the meaninglessness that people struggle with. The drug scene is one aspect of a more general mass phenomenon, namely the feeling of meaninglessness resulting from a frustration of our existential needs. When I lived in California, I had lots of studies with people who smoked marijuana. I've studied with people that did meth. I've studied with people that were alcoholics. And every one of them, there's some kind of deep depression that they're trying to numb themselves from thinking deeply about. And so we've got a problem where if we're going to say that we're going to be a secular person, but I can find meaning in life by my family, or I can find meaning in life on all these things that I really enjoy or whatever, having tons of fun, as soon as you start to think deeply, this is why you're frustrated. All right, that's the second problem with this. So if the first problem is that it doesn't apply to everybody in the world, the second problem is that it's intellectually vexing to think about. Somebody might ask, okay, well, not everybody's going to be a deep thinker, and maybe somebody can go on life and be happy living like a drunk person. They're just amusing themselves all the time. There's still another problem that will end up coming to everybody, and that's the reality of suffering. That there's going to come things in people's lives that will strip your meaning away from you if your meaning is built off of the things of this world. And so look at this quote from Bertrand Russell, who's also an atheist. For the young, there is nothing unattainable, a good thing desired with the whole force of a passionate will, and yet impossible is to them not credible. Yet by death, by illness, by poverty, or the voice of duty, we must learn, each one of us, that the world was not made for us, and that however beautiful may be the things we crave, fate may nevertheless forbid them. Notice how he begins this. For young people, You're a young person, you've got all your years ahead of you. You can go and change the world. You can go and get that career. You can go and make all that money that you wanted. And to you, it seems just not credible that anybody would ever say to you that you might not get all of your dreams accomplished. Well, what are the things that he says here happen and come into people's lives that teach them that this world was not made for you? You're not the one that's in charge of everything. Death. Let's say that I made my wife and 4 kids my meaning in life. One car accident could take away my meaning in life. What about illness? When I lived in Minnesota, I was preaching at this little church of 8 people. And less than 2 miles down the road, there was an institutional church. And I started meeting with their preachers and elders and whatever about figuring out how maybe we could combine the churches, and they were willing to try to do some things that would make us more comfortable, and ultimately there was just going to be too many doctrinal differences where we couldn't meet together. But when I lived in that town, there was no older, wiser preachers, but they had some people there that even though we had some disagreements, I got some good advice from. And one of the guys, his name was Stacy. And he came up to me one time and he said, "Hey, Eric, do you know why there's so many old, cranky people in the world?" And I said, "No, can you please tell me why? Because I really don't want to be one of those people." And he said that what happens is people, when they're young, they don't make God the center of their life. And then their body starts to deteriorate. So if skiing was your God, your age is going to take it away from you. If your beauty or your physical strength was your God, your age will take it away from you. If listening to music is your God, your age will take it away from you. So why are there so many old cranky people? Is because God was not their God, and when life and age stripped their God away from them, they were left bitter and angry. When he says here, death or illness, just think about the deterioration of the human body and all the things that you might enjoy doing and you think that are going to give you meaning in life. Your age will strip it away from you. What about poverty? What if somebody digs up something that you said on social media 10 years ago and you lose your job? What if the economy crashes and all the ways that you wanted to be philanthropic and help other people, it was suddenly taken away from you? What about the voice of duty? Do you want to know one thing that I've seen with the younger generation right now? Is there are a lot of young people that have got dreams of being a YouTube star. No, you're not. Or you think you're going to make it big in the music world, and you think you're going to be some famous musician, which even if you could, you know that environment would not be good for you spiritually. But let's just be honest and say you're not going to make it anyways. But somebody keeps living, you know, I'm going to be a big YouTube star, I'm going to be a content creator, I'm going to be really popular and all this kind of stuff. Do you know what eventually starts to show you that it's not going to happen? Is you've got bills to pay. The voice of duty will come into your life and say that all these things that you want to do are not going to happen. Some kind of suffering is going to come into your life and strip away all the nice things that you thought your life was built off of. And these are quotes from skeptics. Now, let's just review. What are the weaknesses of the secular approach to meaning? The secular approach to meaning being, there is no God that's assigned us meaning. I decide whatever, for me, my meaning in life will be. And for some people, that's their family. For other people, that's their career, whatever. What's the weakness of this? It can't apply to everybody in the world. It's vexing to think about if you're a deep thinker. And suffering is going to come, and it's going to do something to strip it away from you anyways. So at this point, when I'm doing these studies with the skeptics, and they've looked through these quotes, and it's their Bible saying these things, it's their skeptics saying these things, you can sense that somebody might feel like something's being taken away from them. Oh, maybe my life isn't built on a rock, a good foundation. So what's the biblical approach that you come in with then and say, well, this is how the Bible gives us a sense of meaning in life. And let's just compare them. Qualitatively speaking, which one fits our deepest needs? Which one seems more reliable? So what is the biblical approach to meaning in life? The first thing that the Bible says about people is that they're made in God's image. So in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27, then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. What does it mean to be made in God's image? When I was a new Christian, I remember going to one of my religious relatives, and I asked her the question, well, what does this mean? And she just shook her head and she said, there are some mysteries in the Bible that are too profound for us to ever know the answer to. I was like, that's really frustrating if that's true, because, about being made in God's image, because this is the first thing that the Bible says about us. Maybe it's helpful to see where else this word for image is used in the Old Testament. Look at Numbers chapter 33, verse 52, about the destruction of the Canaanites. You shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, and destroy all the figured stones, and destroy all their metal images, and demolish all their high places. This Hebrew word for image, you're made in God's image, is also used to describe the images that were put in the temples of the false gods. So Dagon would have a temple, and inside Dagon's temple, there would be a statue of Dagon, and say Chemosh and Molech and all these different gods, that these images or these statues were visualizations of the god. Let's say for a moment that we went around the room and I asked all of you, if you were to try to think of an animal to picture God with, what would you choose? And some people might say, well, I like a bull, because God's powerful and he's got these big horns. So if I was going to make a temple to God, I would put a bull in it. And some weird person would say, well, how about a rabbit? And I don't know why they'd pick a rabbit. Somebody else would say, I'd pick a lamb, because I think about the lamb being soft and gentle, and that's kind of like what God is like as well. Why did God say, don't make any graven images of me? Because if you have an image that's a bull, and this is what the bull image does. Okay, are you ready for this? This is what the bull image does. It doesn't change. Are you going to reduce God to some image of something that's not complicated and it can't change its emotions ever? You're going to reduce it down to something like that? That's cheapening who God is. So then in the beginning of the Bible, God did make images of himself, and they're not statues of bulls or lambs or something like that. Instead, it's human beings. God dignified every human being, and it doesn't matter how tall you are, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter what country you live in, it doesn't matter what skin color you have, it doesn't matter your level of education. None of those metrics matter, but everybody is made in God's image, which means your purpose in life is to be a reflection of God, to be an imager of God. So that when people would see the image of Molech, they would go, oh yeah, that's like that God that they believe in the heavenly realm. When somebody sees you, they're supposed to see somebody that's trying to reflect God's character, which draws us to this very critical point. The only way you will ever live out what your meaning is to know God. If you don't know God, how do you know what you're supposed to be an image of? But if the only ways that we ever study the Scripture is just, here's six rules of overcoming such and such, and it's just all self-help kind of stuff and things like this that don't help you understand who God is, you're not understanding the one that you were created to reflect. And so that's the basis of this. For the Christian worldview, you're made in God's image. Everybody in the world is made in God's image. And the only way that you're going to tap into what your meaning is to see God's love. And that's how you're supposed to love. You're supposed to learn about God's wrath. And you're never supposed to show wrath to people by punishing them. But there's times where you can have righteous anger. And you're supposed to understand how God shows that. And then you learn that as well. You're supposed to learn God's patience. And that's going to be what helps you reflect that to the world. All these things that we learn about God's wisdom, who God is, we're supposed to be demonstrating that to the world. And that's what our purpose is. All right. If one of the weaknesses of the secular approach to meaning is that suffering, illness, poverty, things outside of your control will strip your meaning in life away from you? Will this meaning in life ever be stripped away from you? In 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, Peter says this, in this regarding their salvation that they have their hope in this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. What are some of the sufferings that this audience is going through? You can imagine economic uncertainty. They've been scattered from their homelands. Are there a lot of people right now worried about what's going to happen to the economy? I saw some things on Twitter today about hyperinflation and how it's going to even get worse and we're all going to die and all this kind of stuff. And so you have that going on. Throughout the book of 1 Peter, the Christians are being spoken against as evildoers. Are you worried that in the future we as Christians in the United States are going to start to get persecuted more and more, that sort of thing? In 1 Peter chapter 3, there's marriage problems, it seems, as well. All these different kinds of sufferings. And notice that Peter says in verse 6 that you've been grieved. The pain is real. The tears are real. Shortly after I became a Christian, there was a religiously zealous girl on the college campus that I was friends with. We went to some of the denominational studies on campus. And we got out of the car at the same time to go to our classes. And she said, "So how are you doing today, Eric?" And the night before, my mom and dad were printing out articles from atheist websites on why the Bible is not trustworthy. Every time around the dinner table was like World War III. Because of what I was believing, and it was just a really rough night, and I didn't get much sleep, and so I got out of the car, and she said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm not doing so well," and she looked at me like this. She said, "Every day should be rejoicing in the Lord." Can Christians grieve? Does it always mean that we're smiling, though? Notice here that he says, you guys are grieving, but through the trials, through these things that for a secular person, the sufferings of this world would strip your meaning in life away from you, this is working for you. Your faith is compared to this gold. It's being tested by fire, so that what comes through out of it is a more purified faith, that through the suffering, Satan can throw whatever he might throw at me, but if I handle it by having steadfast faith, my meaning in life, I'm being driven deeper into it, not further away from it. It's through the testing of the trials that we become more and more like the image of the one who created us. You think about the times in your life that you've suffered the most. Did it take you away from your meaning? No, it drove you deeper into it, because your meaning is to be an imager of God. And it was through the sufferings that your growth was turbocharged. So do you see how in the Christian worldview, we are inoculated from what suffering would otherwise do to you? But notice one final thing. There's also a judgment day. And judgment day in the Bible can oftentimes be looked at as a very scary thing, and there's good reason to think about it that way, but we should also think about it as good news as well. In Ecclesiastes, do you remember throughout the book, Solomon is trying to do this experiment where he finds meaning and satisfaction under the sun, life apart from God. And you can remember it with 7 W's, 7 things that begin with the letter W that he tries to find meaning in, and I probably won't remember them all right now, but women, wealth, wine, being well known, work, and 2 other things, whatever they were. And so all throughout the book, he keeps saying, vanity of vanities, it's all vanity. And when he gets to the final 2 verses of the book, this is not a trite statement. This is not some kind of like, oh, we've heard this sort of thing before. When he says at the end of the book, the end of the matter, all has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man, for God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. All throughout the book, it's been frustration, 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 frustration. And now he finally fully surfaces at the end and he says, but this is what gives me meaning. Why is it that final judgment in the book of Ecclesiastes is looked at as a relief. Do you remember when Leo Tolstoy said that I could give no meaning to any single action I did or to my whole life? And then when Ecclesiastes 12 here says that God is going to bring every deed into judgment, whether secret, every secret thing, whether good or evil. Do you know what that means? If there's a God that's going to judge you one day, suddenly everything you do has meaning. Do you see the point? If you don't have a judgment day, nothing that you do matters, ultimately. And you have to conclude then that there's really no substantive difference between Mao Zedong and the Apostle Paul if there's no judgment day. But it's good news that there's a judgment day, because that means whatever you do when nobody else is looking, whatever you do when you're around other people, all of that you have to answer to God for, and that means that there is a God that's assigned meaning to everything that you do. So for the skeptic that says, well, I don't like the idea of judgment day, okay, you take away judgment and you have no meaning in life ultimately. And when the Bible teaches that on that judgment day, our purpose of being image bearers of God will come to its full climax. In 1 John 3, verse 2, Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. This pursuit that you've been going towards all your life of being made in the image of God, and the sufferings that have helped you become more imprinted into the image of God, one day you're going to experience the full fulfillment of that when he returns, and you're going to be made to be just like him. So let's review the biblical approach to meaning. Is that you're created to be imagers of God, and that applies to everybody. Suffering doesn't take you away from your meaning, it drives you deeper into your meaning. And judgment day makes everything that you do matter. And you just put the two together, side by side, the secular worldview and the Christian worldview. And just ask yourself, which one seems to fit my deepest needs? Which one seems to resonate the most with me? And maybe, just maybe, there's something more to Christianity than I realized. And so that's for our discussion tonight on our need for meaning. And I realize that in a discussion like this, there's all kinds of rabbit holes and side questions that could be asked about all these matters. Tomorrow morning, we're going to be looking at our need for our morality, and then our need for hope. But I believe now we're about to have a song, unless we want to break it open for a couple minutes of question. Sure. We'll do what we did last night. If anybody wants to ask any clarifying questions or anything like that, we can do that for just a few minutes before we have our final song. Great. It was crystal clear. All right, so we're going to have a song then. And what's the song?
Heavenly Love.
Heavenly Love. All right, if there's anybody here tonight that is in need of encouragement or help, this is an opportunity to get your life right with God. If there's anything we can do, please talk to somebody before you leave here, or come forward while we stand, while we sing.